Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Let's Talk Stories. I am here with our hosts, Charles and Jaylon, and I am your other host, Jared. And today we are talking about Hadestown. We're going to get into some of that, but before that, we're going to break down the usuals. I do have some trivia for you guys this week. Again, this week it'll be Mythology Trilogy. Trilogy trivia. English is hard, but yeah, it'll be some mythology trivia as well as some mythology would you rathers that we'll kick around and have a little fun with. But yeah, so first things first, how's everybody doing this week?
I am very caffeinated, so at the moment I am good.
I am blah.
Ooh.
That's rough. It's Monday.
That's rough.
Gotcha. I am also. I think I'm somewhere in between the two of you. I am not quite blah, but not quite good. I'm just here. I'm mid.
Hang it.
I am mid. That is what I am. But all that to say, we're all here, which is really good. It's good that we all showed up. So I appreciate you guys for being here. That goes for my hosts as well as those that choose to listen to what we have to say.
Infinite number of podcasts, and you chose this one.
Amazing.
That is
so
true.
much.
That is awesome. So before we jump into the conversations, roundtable discussion of what you guys are watching or reading or listening to this week.
I feel like this week has been really crazy, so I haven't actually had time to watch or read or listen to anything. But I did pick up the book that I was rereading because it's my favorite fiction story. And I read one chapter, and they're short chapters. I read one chapter of it, but it was so good, it stuck with me the entire week. So yeah, the Wingfeather Saga, amazing. Even one chapter gets me through a whole week.
Very nice. What about you, Charles?
I'm trying to get through my list, but the library is so tempting. I was actually looking for a different thing at the library, and I found this other thing that I needed, which is the manga series, and I'm probably pronouncing it wrong, Witch Hat Atelier. This thing I've been reading for a few years now. I'm almost caught up to the current volume. My friend, a good friend of mine, recommended it, and I'm so thankful she did because it's phenomenal. This is, genuinely, it is a consistently phenomenal, terrific fantasy story. I read this and I go, this is what comic books can be, both on a physical art level and a writing level. It's got these Harry Potter wondrous vibes of magic and witchcraft, but also it's so densely constructed. It's insane. I can't describe it simply with justice, but know that it is ridiculously brilliant, which is why when the anime series, I think, premieres this year, it's probably either going to be completely overtaken by a bunch of people and they're going to push me out of the fandom because that's what they do, or because I give it my full support, everyone goes, oh, Charles likes it, well then let's completely ignore it, and it's going to be one or the other. But it is ridiculously brilliant and massively impressive. I'm still thinking, I just started volume 10 and I'm thinking about volume 9 still, which is fantastic. So that's my recommendation.
Nice. I am, as usual, the problem child of the group because I and my ADHD cannot get me to sit still with anything. However, I started reading Fourth Wing.
I've corrupted you.
Yes, I started reading that, and so far, I do like it.
Okay.
I do like it so far. There are problems, but I like it. I am, I think, 3 chapters in, but because I was doing the audiobook and reading along, but then my Spotify premium went out, so I have to pay that when I get paid. So unfortunately, I can't listen to it until I reactivate my account. So I had to stop, but I was enjoying it. I know where I left off. I've been taking notes. We will have an episode on that. Charles, you will not have to be present for that episode.
Unless you want to.
Unless you and you want to
read.
Really I'm such a slow reader. I'm such a slow reader.
That's fair.
So to be fair, it's probably not going to be any time in the next like few episodes, but nonetheless, it will be one that we read at some point.
To quote Futurama, the heart is willing, but the flesh is weak and bruised. I would love to read faster, but I cannot. That's why I go, because my book schedule is already ridiculous enough. So
fair.
Sorry.
We'll let you enjoy your books.
It's still exciting to hear the excitement pass on through the party here.
Outside of Fourth Wing, I am also watching, and I'm further along with that than I am the book, Troll Hunter, Tales of Arcadia.
Isn't that Guillermo del Toro's?
Yes.
Yeah.
And it is probably one of the best animated shows I have watched in a really long time. That being said, that takes into account the fact that I recently, just last year, watched in its entirety Avatar: The Last Airbender. Including that, to me, it has been probably hands down just amazing. And I didn't think I was going to like it because I was like, oh, this is going to be some weird, like Toy Story animation bullshit that I don't really care about. Not that I have a problem with Toy Story, because I do love Toy Story.
No, bad computer animated cartoons are the devil. I've been saying, I said that in high school, and everyone kind of looked at me like, what are you talking about? I'm like, look at it, it looks like crap. And everyone's like, no, it looks fine. I'm like, okay, whatever.
So I mean, like, to me, it's been great. I love it. The animation grew on me. The fight sequences are pretty badass. And it had one of the greatest monologues I've ever heard. And from a character in an animated show or live action, for that matter, in a really long time. I will say not ever, but in a really, really long time. So yeah, it made me kind of excited.
Nice.
To do that. I'm also getting ready to watch Vox Machina, the legend. I think it's the Legend of Vox Machina, which is kind of, it's been pitched to me as kind of like the Suicide Squad meets Dungeons and Dragons. So I'm kind of interested in checking that out. So we'll see. But overall, that is where I landed this week, and I'm pretty excited about it. And I'll probably be talking about that for the next few weeks, so you guys can just deal with that. It's called the
Suicide Squad, and yet most of the characters always live in these movies.
Yeah,
isn't that weird? I'm sorry. That was a weird thought, but I was just sort of thinking, I was like, wait a second.
How come no one else has thought it before, though?
Well, I was just sort of thinking, like, like an Alien, where like squad. There's like one or two characters that survive in an Alien movie. I was just sort of thinking, I'm like, in the Suicide Squad, shouldn't there be like one survivor, maybe?
Yeah, exactly.
It was just be
like the Hunger Games.
Yeah, it was just a weird thought that I had structurally, just an interesting thing.
So we are talking about Hades Town, which is, for those that don't know, is a musical. Yeah, a musical, I guess. That is a retelling of Orpheus and Eurydice.
Try to keep up, Jared. Come on.
Yeah, my bad. I told you, English is hard, and so apparently it's Greek. So it's a retelling of their story, and it is not Chaos, for those that haven't seen Chaos, which is also a retelling of their story, as well as others. But I found it. Let's talk about it, guys. What did you guys think about it, first and foremost? Did you like it? I know Charles' answer, but I'm going to ask him anyway. Did you like it?
Oh, yeah. I've always thought this was a really, really good musical. I found this, I think it was like just before the pandemic. I think it was when it had its big Tony Award winning shtick. I think I actually tried to find it before, when it was like off Broadway, the concept album. I can't remember, but I finally found the whole thing. I think it's fantastic. I think it's interesting. It's great. It's, first of all, it has, and I could be wrong, it's got the guy who plays Orpheus is the same guy who played Peter Parker in Spider-Man: Turn Off the Dark. I could be wrong, but I listen to a lot of musical albums, so hopefully I'm right. The lady who plays Persephone is the lady who plays, I can't remember her name, from Natasha Pierre and the Great Khan of 1812. It's literally an opening song in that musical that names all the characters, and I'm drawing a complete blank right now. Elaine, because Elaine is a slut. There it is. That's the lyric. That's the lyric. That's not me. That's the lyric. Look it up. Natasha Pierre and the Great Khan of 1812. Anyway, so that's really cool. And then Patrick Page is in this musical, and I love Patrick Page in almost anything he does because he's amazing. He plays Hades. So that's why I love it. But no, in any case, though, like, I loved the steampunky, these Great Depression style and aesthetic of it all. But what I thought was fantastic about it was how it genuinely convinced me. I was like, is this going to be different? Is it going to end differently? It genuinely convinced me, which is crazy. Because for those who don't know, Orpheus and Eurydice, my brother hates the story because he's a big myth guy, but he hates the story of Orpheus and Eurydice. For those who don't know, so Orpheus, the son of a muse, he's like the John Lennon meets Chester Bennington. I don't know. He's like the musical of everyone, and he loves Eurydice, and they're all like, oh, it's amazing love, and she dies, and he's so heartbroken. He goes to the underworld, and he goes and he sings this wonderful song to Hades and Persephone, and all the underworld goes, let her out, let her out. And Hades goes, well, I can't let Eurydice go free because that would be bad. So here's the challenge. Orpheus, you got to go back to where you came from, out of the underworld. Eurydice behind you. You can't look behind you. And of course, here's the edge of the underworld, and Orpheus just needs to take one more step, and he turns around, and then he loses her forever. My brother hates the story. He's just like, why are you this stupid idiot? Just walk. And so I've agreed with that for a long time, that I'm like, Orpheus and Eurydice is such a strange story because this is up for massive debate, so take this with a bunch of salt. But there's a sort of masochism to Greek mythology specifically, where it's like, oh no, everything sucks. That's life, you know, and kind of it. And Orpheus and Eurydice sort of has that. This story, it's got great songs, it's a great musical, it's really wonderfully done. I've seen some of the footage. It's really wonderfully constructed. It's interesting, and it's a great change of like updating certain little details. I love the Hades Persephone B plot of it all, or B plot, subplot. But what's interesting is that it gave credence, or not credence, maybe credence is the right credit. Let's say credit for simplicity's sake. It gave credit to this myth. Why does it matter? Why is it interesting? Why is there meaning to it? And Lindsay Ellis is an essay. She's a really good writer, and she's a really great essayist. I joke about Lindsay Ellis. I'm like, if I ever met Lindsay Ellis, I would love to just say, I will give you any lunch you want. If you maybe have to go across town, I'll get you lunch and just give it to you as an honor, so you don't have to get up and go get lunch for yourself. That's like this joke, because I respect her immensely. She's just a fantastic writer. But she had a really interesting comment of connecting this play of the whole point of the story is, why are tragedies important to our society, to our spirit? She connected this with Titanic, where she's like, it doesn't matter how many times I see this movie, every time they cut the engines off of the Titanic, you always go, come on, move to the side. And it's interesting that they bring this up. If you'll forgive me, Showtime here. Sorry. It's like story time. So this is the novelization of Revenge of the Sith. Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, right? So this is the one where everything goes to hell and Anakin Skywalker becomes Darth Vader. Yay! Right. It's a really good novelization. But there's a passage in here that I always really, really loved. So it doesn't it goes a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Fine. Yeah, whatever. And it doesn't start the story. It does something that's not in the movie. And it says, this story happened a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. It is already over. Nothing can be done to change it. Mm-hmm. And that, it is happening as you read these words, which is directly from Dickens, by the way. And I loved that idea. When I read this novelization, it was a fantastic idea of saying, it's already happened. So why are we bothering? Because there's nothing you can do to change it. There's nothing you can do to change these tragedies. Why do we do it? And basically what Lindsay Ellis said, what this story says, and what even that novelization says, it gives you hope. You can't help yourself. Because every time you watch King Kong, you go, maybe this time Kong won't go up the Empire State Building. Maybe just this one time. But you can't. Can't be stopped. But it makes you hopeful. And it's an incredible thing that Hadestown did. And even re-listening to it again, it's just a real bopper. And the way he sings, Orpheus sings Epic, the Epic song, the song he keeps developing, totally makes me want to look on one of my musical ideas. I have 1, 2, 3. I think 3. I have 3 musical ideas, and this musical makes me want to work on one of them, which is not a small compliment. So,
well, I need to hear all 3 of them eventually.
I can give you the DL later.
I did not listen to this until it was on our homework for this episode, and I immediately fell in love with it It affected me deeply emotionally because it felt like it was speaking directly to creators and artists. There was a lot of different things that I just got like way excited about, going down rabbit holes, so I'll probably touch on those. Yes, I agree. It's so frustrating because it's like, Orpheus, don't look back, you dumbass.
Mm-hmm.
But you brought up, I was gonna make a pun off of your take this with a bunch of salt, because the story reminds me a lot about the story of Lot in the Bible, where like the pillar of salt, because he looked back, his wife turned into a pillar of
His
salt.
wife looked
Yeah.
back. Yeah.
And I was like, that. So we're again proving that stories as old as time. I mean, the musical opens with it, where Hermes sings. It's an old song. It's a sad song, but we're gonna sing it anyway because there's something important that they're trying to say. And even if the story is old as time, even if we've heard it before, even if it's sad, we still need to hear it again. This was actually what the chapter that I read in the Wingfeather Saga was touching on this week, was remembering. We all get to a really dark place, and the plot in this fantasy was, if you don't remember who you are, the darkness overcomes you and you become a monster. You have to remember who you are in order to keep the darkness at bay, and sometimes you need other people around you to tell you that story. And I think there's something so powerful about, I mean, we all want to say that we wouldn't be stupid and do what Orpheus did, but there might be, I think it can be applied to other situations in life. Like for me, it's very easy as an artist to doubt that your art has any value. And the second you turn around in doubt is when it stops mattering and you stop moving forward to putting that value out in the world. So that was a message that really stuck with me. Also, I did not know until first I just listened to the musical, and that was great. And then just before we started recording, I was looking up some videos of the Broadway musical, and I did not know that Jordan Fisher played Orpheus for a little bit, and that made me really excited because
That name sounds familiar. That was the guy I was talking about.
Okay.
That sounds familiar.
Well,
who is this again?
Jordan Fisher. He was, see, I know him from Disney Channel back in my day. And I'm gonna be real here. He's as close to a celebrity crush as I've gotten. So, anyway.
Fair enough.
We can move on from that.
Don't discuss it.
As long as his name wasn't Kyle. There's always a Kyle. In the 2000s sex machine of Disney Channel or 90s Nickelodeon or whatever the hell you call it. Anyway, moving on, sorry.
It's funny, my best friend's name is Kyle, so that's
Tell him to
hilarious.
change his name.
I'm gonna send this clip to him specifically.
There's only one good Kyle Reese. Moving on.
Sorry for any Kyle listening.
I'm not. Change your name.
Oh my god. So for me, I did not at first. I didn't know if I liked this or not. I didn't know if I would like it or not. And I think the issue that I had with it, and this, I guess it's just me. I'm always the one.
Not always.
Who's like,
just sometimes.
These last few episodes, it seems like it's me.
The rest of us are just fangirling too hard.
But no, it's like, for me, I sat with it and I thought, okay. And I watched it on YouTube. I watched the one that I dropped in the group chat for you guys, which is like an amalgamation of different people filming it at different times, but it all flows through. The music and everything is all the same. It's just, it's different. So it'll cut from like somebody in the stands bootlegging it to somebody, to like an actual production version of it, and then it'll cut back to that. So, and then it'll be like someone way over here and then someone way over there. So I was like, when you got past that, I was like, okay, that's fine. But the thing that really made me, that gave me pause, and then was the music, because I'm not a musical person. I am the guy, and I will openly admit it, I am the guy who will point and make fun of the fact that like somebody was talking and then randomly burst into song and it's just accepted. I will not only make fun of it, but I will also be quite upset about how it's happening. And I know it is about suspending disbelief and just sort of being in the whimsical moment of musicals. I'm not whimsical enough. I accept that. I've lost all my whimsy at a very early age. But my mother forced me to watch The King and I and The Sound of the Music over and over and over again.
Okay, but The King and I is not good. It's not musical's fault.
I know. I'm not saying that all I'm saying is I was forced to watch those as a kid, and I developed an aversion to musicals in general. So when I hear a musical and I like it, usually it's because the music is really, really catchy. It stays in my mind. It kind of stays with me. The music of this wasn't catchy to me. It was kind of like, and I think that was kind of the point. I don't think it was supposed to be, but it just wasn't, and that threw me off. But when I got out of that, and I got out of the fact that, you know, this isn't Lin-Manuel, and I shouldn't be expecting it to be this, you know, jazzy good time, and I listened to the lyrics, I was like, okay. Then I sat with it for a little bit, and I said, let me think about it. And then I watched this essay about it afterwards that someone else did, and I was like, what they got out of it, I definitely didn't get out of it. And everybody else was talking about, you know, how this is about the love of art, and this is about how, you know, we have to stay true to our dreams and our beliefs and never giving into doubt, which I wrote an article about, which will be on my personal Substack. But what really stood out to me was this was a conversation about, this was a commentary on capitalism. And it was the idea of Orpheus representing the dream, the goal, the thing that we all want that's not a 9 to 5. And Eurydice represented all of us in our hope and our dream that we can become something more because we need to, because we've lived in this survival mode forever. And Hades represents the big fat cats that are constantly taking from us and taking from us. Persephone represents the where we could go if we've surrendered ourselves, the boomer generation that have surrendered themselves to work, and then, you know, that's the life that you live. And then that's that dying spirit that cries out for the possibility of freedom and a dream and hope, but just can't get it because they've sold their soul to the working force. And when I saw it through that lens, it made me look at the whole thing as an amazing piece of work, because it was kind of brilliant how it was told in that way. And then, not to mention some of the other things that I saw, which again, in my article, it talks more about what we as creatives can learn from Hades and from Orpheus and the different dangers of ambition, because I think that that's also kind of the point, which when you start to think about this particular musical, I guess the question that I want to ask you guys, in themes and subtexts specifically, this is the section we're going to talk about that. How do you feel Hadestown reflects modern societal issues, and what emotions did the story evoke in you?
I started to add to the symbolism that you just touched on. I saw Hadestown as, it's very easy as humans to build a wall against other people's suffering, thinking that you have to protect what you have. And the whole idea of Hades is basically enslaving all these people to build a wall under the guise of keeping them free from suffering. You know, it never works out that way. And Eurydice being there and saying, I'm going to forget who I am, because she started seeing what everyone around her was going through, and she was losing herself. And she said this one line in one of her songs. It said, I open my mouth and nothing comes out. And in a commentary about everyone else that's working, they said they can look, but they can't see. It's easier that way. I think it's really easy to ignore the suffering of other people, like Orpheus choosing to walk down this really dark and dangerous and lonely, long path to get to Hades Town to rescue Eurydice, he's choosing to enter something, singing his song, and he's in effect giving that voice, being the one to see what everyone else is going through and giving voice to it when they don't have a voice themselves. And that's what artists do. That's why art is so important. That's why people who create in this world, that is your highest calling, is to give voice to the suffering that other people don't know how to give voice to or aren't able to give voice to. And I think it's really interesting because when Orpheus first meets Eurydice, when I had to listen through it a couple times, but when I first listened to it, the very first thing that stood out to me was Orpheus was talking about this amazing song that he was going to sing that was going to be able to bring spring again, make all the flowers grow, make the water flow, and grow their food so that no one's starving anymore. And so Eurydice is like, well, why don't you sing it? And Orpheus says, it isn't finished yet, I can't sing it. And Eurydice finally convinces him to sing just the part that is finished. And suddenly, like, all these flowers start springing up and, warmth and sunshine comes out. And, Eurydice is still like, no, like, it's not finished yet. It's not finished yet. But Eurydice says, but it can do all this? Like, you have to finish it. And I think that as creatives, as a writer and as an editor, every single story I've come across, there is always room for improvement. You can be tweaking your writing until the day you die and never put it out into the world because you can always find something that needs to be improved. But even imperfect art is still important art, and the world needs it. So why wouldn't you contribute your little bit of light to the world, even if it's imperfect, even if it's not finished yet? So for me, I heard telling myself, don't fall into the trap of thinking that something has to be perfect in order for it to make a difference. And Orpheus was an inspiration to what we should all aspire to be as artists, where, when you have a sensitive soul and you're sensitive to the suffering in the world and you're creating art based off of that, it means that suffering hits you different. But it's the sensitive souls that are tasked with doing the hardest walking through that dark place, through that long road, and they're the ones that make a difference. So for me, it was encouragement to all those who see the suffering of others and give voice to it. And then, in the end, even though the story in general ends as a tragedy, there's still some good in it. There's still some happy ending because Orpheus does get everyone else in the underworld to wake up and realize that what they have isn't really freedom. And Hades was right to be scared of Orpheus's power, of the power of his song, because it did, as Hades sang, bravery can be contagious when the band is playing loud. And that contagious bravery allowed Orpheus to create this uprising that essentially freed all these people.
Well, that'll be the end of the episode because Jalon said something so brilliant, much better than anything I have to say. No, that's really good. And to that end, I think something really part of what I take away is the song that always hits me. I think it's called "Is It True," which is the song that Orpheus sings to get the underworld's attention. And I think this is really interesting because in the myth, that's the story. People tell you, oh, and then Orpheus sings a song. Okay, what song? Well, no one knows. And it's also interesting because if you want to make a really deep connection, in Tolkien's The Silmarillion and Beren and Luthien also sings a song to more or less Middle-earth's Hades. Don't get me started, it's a long story. And moves his heart so much to change. But you don't hear that song either. But here you do sing the song, and it's about Orpheus basically being kind of like a child and saying, why is it like this? Just very, very simply. And that those who roll the dice always say the toss is fair. It really, really hits.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of that song really, really hits me every time I hear it because it is, you get so wrapped up in the casualness of injustice and corruption that you kind of just forget. and you hear the song, you go, oh wait, that is BS. That isn't right. And I think it's fascinating that in this version, that is the content of the song that leads to this once in a infinity moment in the underworld. And then, of course, the song that really does change Hades' heart is a love song, which is incredible too. So, to all that end, in terms of this subtext, the thing, like this theme that connects the whole enchilada that really, really moves me is I think what I was listening to it, I'm like, what's really fascinating is I remember when, trying to say this without putting my literary professor hat on, Hades always gets a bad rap, right? So, yeah, we can look at Disney's Hercules for that fault, but that's not. It's Western society doesn't want to die because if we die, we lose our stuff. And no one wants to lose their stuff. Ergo, Hades is a bad guy. Hades is always the bad guy. Blah, 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 blah. The Percy Jackson movie, the original one, he threw some crap like that. I don't know. That movie sucked. I can't remember. But of course, that's not true. It's not true in the book. And it's not true in the TV show adaptation they just did. Hades is not a terrible guy. So when he comes into the story a little bit harsher, villainous, I was like, oh, okay, we're gonna do that version. But you find out he's literally he tells Persephone, you were gone for so long, lover, I was lonesome. Right. And of course this is not necessarily a great relationship going on here. But there is a place of genuine love and loneliness that comes with him. That's why the whole thing of Hades stealing off Persephone, kind of to begin with, comes from that sense of loneliness. And you think, oh, Hades is actually like that. And if you look at the whole version of this story, something that I find really fascinating with stories in general is it shows human frailty for me. Everyone is soft and tender. Hermes can't help himself but really like this dumb musical theater kid. And the dumb musical theater kid wants to be good. He's not stupid. So when he finally turns around and looks at Eurydice, I understood it for the first time ever. I was like, oh yeah, I totally get it, because you lose your own belief. Anyone could do that. And I love that there's even lyrics saying, don't judge Eurydice for being an idiot. Because she's not an idiot, because if you're hungry, ever been hungry, audience? Like, really hungry? I've been really hungry before. You're not right in the head, period. And Eurydice does the same thing. And that's really exceptional. And Hades is also human and Persephone. And I think what's interesting, it's not saying humans, everyone's a human being. Kind of, but that's not what I'm saying. Everyone has a frailty in the world. Everything is very fragile. And to understand the fragility instead of people's hardness, I think understands them as a little bit more of a soulful being. And that's interesting because I think the most powerful thing I've ever seen a story tell me is you're not stupid. And I think there are extensions to that, which is that people are frail. Now, having this popular television, well, not just television, but like popular trend of everyone's a monster, everyone is a dick, doesn't please me. Yeah, it was charming for 5 seconds. But having a story about people being frail, I think is much more exceptional and much more fascinating. I think that's kind of what I take a lot from this version of the story, is that Hades is not a great guy. I'm not defending him in this version or whatever, but he's not a pure evil guy. And Orpheus isn't stupid, and Eurydice isn't stupid. They're not. It's kind of giving a little bit of the frail humanity that maybe the Greek myth, at least by the time it's trickled down to us, doesn't have anymore. Which I find very, very fascinating. And there is a ton of lyrics there you can unpack, right even down to the kind of this folksy style. In brief, I've always felt that country music gets a really bad rap. Yes, I like country music, but the thing is though, but not all country music, because let's be honest, country music is like the worst thing in the world. It's the worst thing musically, singing, subject matter. It's the worst thing in the world, but it doesn't have to be. It's kind of been co-opted by a bunch of crazy loony bins into being some sort of like, you know me, you can think of where I'm going to take that. But like Woody Guthie's, Natalie Merchant and some other dude sang Woody Guthie's Way Over Yonder. I think it's all in the minor key. Oh my gosh, that song is like the best thing in the world. And I think the folksiness gives it a humanity. Basically what I'm trying to say is folk music, country music, I know there are differences, but let's say the acoustic guitar. I love it because that's what everyone can do. That's why it's called country, because everyone can do it. It's just been co-opted by a bunch of loony bins. But I think that's what kind of ties in with this one. It's not grand opera, it's dirt. Dirt music. The thing you would literally sit on the dirt at a campsite and strum a guitar with. Find it fascinating. So that is my take. Did I answer your question, Jared? Okay, good.
Well,
I was going to jump off that and go more into subtext as opposed to like overall general theme. But
Absolutely.
what you said about Hades is so true, because it struck me that I am not very educated in the Greek myths, so I'm going to absolutely fail at this trivia that Jared has. But I find the retellings so fascinating because it's another example of stories as old as time still touching our hearts today. And I also find it fascinating to engage the imagination of who were these characters really? What were they actually getting at? And with Hades, I found it interesting that he was telling his whole message to these young lovers was love's gonna hurt you. So you need to be tougher than that, and you need to control love so that you get what you want. And it was really interesting to think pain can either make you destructive or constructive. Because with Orpheus and Eurydice, they took their pain and they made it into something that could help other people. And I think that's what, as creatives contributing positive change to the world, we have to be willing to do that with our pain. And for Hades, he took his pain and he let it fester and make him bitter and destructive now to other people around him. And I find it interesting. I agree with what you said. Like, there is some frailty in everyone. And even the so-called villains of all of our stories, they have a story themselves. And if we can understand what makes someone a villain, we can understand that we have it in us to be a villain ourselves. And we have to be careful that we don't let ourselves become that villain.
interesting. Very interesting. You guys have a lot of good points. And in talking about these gods specifically, I think that brings me to the next part where I want to talk about character dynamics. So with character dynamics, I feel like you can have complex characters. We've talked about this before. Complex characters with conflicting motivations, and ultimately giving them that makes them richer and more relatable. I personally am obsessed with telling stories about gods. Part of that is childhood religious trauma rebellion.
Fair.
Part of that is the realization. Part of that is addressing real issues or real thoughts that I have, my own philosophical musings about what God is and what God is not. But, personally, I spent a lot of time being told, you never, when I was like first starting writing, I there was a few things I would never go near. I would never talk about demons, gods, magic. I would avoid those types of things purely because that's how I was brought up. Those things were no, you don't talk about that. You don't, because in talking about that brings those things to you. So you just don't do it. As I've gotten older and learned to escape that, I've come to see God in general. As my niece and I, and this is, bear with me, but my niece and I had this conversation sometime last year, the year before. She's very, very devout when it comes to religion. She believes in God, Jesus, the whole nine. And we were having this conversation, and I was saying, in the Bible, it talks about how we are made in God's image. And I always thought that statement was funny. But I thought, what if God was not one person or one being, but what if there were billions of gods, and each god was responsible for all of us, for each individual human, and their job is to write our story. And so when I thought about it in that way, I thought, when I get up in the morning, when I go about my day and my story is being written, and then I go to bed, it's my God gets off of his typewriter or his computer or whatever and goes to live his life, and he has his or her questions and her thoughts, her doubts, her fears. She is infinitely just as human as I am. And to call a God human is more like saying perhaps imperfection and frailty isn't humanity, but it's divinity. And I think that when we see stories like this, where it's retellings of gods, or stories like American Gods, or any retelling that involves gods, I always love when the gods are human, when they feel human, when they worry about human things that we consider to be human things. I think that's so interesting, because I feel like we automatically assume that because we deal with it, it's human behavior. But if we're made in God's image, maybe it's godlike behavior. We're just doing what gods do, in the grand scheme of things. And also, the term God is really a relative term based on where you stand in the pecking order. To ants, we are gods. Our pets, we are gods. People like to say, I'm their parent. No, we're their gods. We provide their food. We allow them to, as far as they're concerned, we allow them to live or die in any way, shape, or form. So godlike behavior is really, it's really just a weird thing that humans decided was somehow divine. But I just think all the things that we admire most about God, we can see in human beings if we just look close enough. And I think that's one of the reasons why I don't believe in, the exaltation of the sky daddy and all the things that come with it. I believe that God is not a being in the universe. God is you. God is me. And humanity is God. And the beauty of us as a species proves that to me. Not because we do the right thing all the time, but because we don't. And because we angst over the fact that we don't. And the fact that others don't. That's God to me. That is the beauty of, that is divinity in all of its glory. Perfection isn't God, I don't think. And so I like that Persephone and Eurydice and Orpheus, even though Orpheus and Eurydice aren't gods, but Hades, and Hades specifically is a character that comes off as incredibly insecure, who's would do anything to hold on to the person he loves, even at the risk of harming others and oppressing others and doing things like that. And while we as human beings like to point the finger and say, "Oh, that's toxic. That's terrible. You shouldn't do that," but I can oddly relate to it. I can oddly understand. I know what it's like to love someone so much that you are willing to hold on so tightly that they almost lose their identity in your grasp. And I know what that's like. I get that. And I don't think that makes Hades horrible. I think that makes him human.
Mm.
And so I find it interesting to see these clashings of larger than life figures. The same thing could be said about, although he doesn't feature in this particular story, Zeus. Zeus is often in recent years, Charles pointed it out earlier about the whole, the Hercules movie did a great job of painting, Hades is kind of like the devil. He's the bad guy. We're supposed to hate him. And Zeus is kind of like, the bright, lovable, almost goofy, but still loving father that loves his thing. But if you know the story of Greek mythology, you know that Zeus is not at all a loving, caring dad of any kind. He's Chaos. The Netflix show Chaos is a perfect example of what Zeus is supposedly like. This individual who sleeps around, who's vain and insecure and has all of these thoughts. It's like in the real mythology of all of these characters, they're all incredibly human. And the pantheon is all incredibly human. And I find that so interesting. And so I think that it's really interesting for these characters. But my question is, how do you feel that Eurydice, Hades, Persephone, and Orpheus added to the texture of the story? And who did you relate to the most?
Ooh, it's a good question. I feel like for all of them, they had conflicting desires. For Zeus, he wanted to build his safe space, and he wanted to keep all the suffering out, and he wanted to keep what he loved in. And for Persephone, she realized that she ended up being trapped when she fell in love with Hades, and now she just wants to be free. And for Eurydice, she just wants to survive. And then for Orpheus, he wants to be this beacon of light to everything that is good. He wants to sing this song that is going to ultimately feed everyone and everything that he loves. And so I feel like all their conflicting desires clash in a really interesting way that does give texture. The whole steampunk and like I appreciated the music because I loved how the steampunk and the different actors and the way that you just immediately felt like you were in New Orleans in the 1920s. Just that alone gave it so much texture because you could immediately imagine where the story was taking place and what these people were struggling with. As far as who I related to the most, I related to all of them at different points. I already said that I related to Orpheus when he said, "It's not finished yet, it's not finished yet." But there's a lot of different points where the lyrics, like, I just wrote down a whole bunch of lyrics in my notes, and I was like, I'm holding on to these and studying them for later. So I feel like I'm quoting all of them, and they're coming out randomly here. But the cultural and human commentary was really interesting to me, and that's what I related to.
Yeah, I think the dynamics are interesting in that sense of so in terms of conflict, I get kind of annoyed when I hear people go like, well, this is a philosophical conflict between this group and that group. I'm like, so for anyone who's like read Mobile Suit Gundam or watched Mobile Suit Gundam, the original, it's like, oh, well, this one group wants to be free. I'm like, yes, they also blew up a bunch of people. Like, and things are complicated, but, sometimes it's like, come on, you're not really, if this really happened in real life, you're not going to jump in bed with them. And if you are, come on, it's not that flavor. But here it's interesting is that what I think it's more grounded, it's more human, more relatable in the sense that Hades and Orpheus in a way are very similar, where they're trying to make and protect a home that they can have with the one they care about the most, but they're not necessarily in tune with said significant other. And I think it's interesting that they want this. I guess what I'm trying to say in terms of dynamics, it's interesting that they want a same thing, but it's completely different realms of this bubble of the same thing, which is interesting because I feel like sometimes, and this isn't a bad thing at all, sometimes people will say, okay, here's the thing, it's this story, and now the coin is flipped. So it's the other side of the coin. That's good. That's not a bad thing. But I also think you can explore different dynamics between characters by having them want the same subject, but not necessarily the same object of something. So they don't have the same object because they're very, very different people, different characters. But that sense of wanting to build something and keep something and make something good for their love is the same thing. And I find that very interesting how it clashes, because you can't, like, to kind of quote a very, very significant episode of Doctor Who, that other comment I was saying between these two warring groups who have the same side, eventually they're going to have to sit down and talk and work it out. But for these personal things, talking is not necessarily the way they work out when they're more personal. And I think that's a really interesting element of basically how you can have conflicts develop or start, develop, and end in very different places than the usual track. You just kind of got to think. Sometimes really it just kind of comes down to thinking, to quote Ghostbusters 2, what happens when we take the baby away? What happens if we push them in this direction or that direction? Where do you take it? The characters I relate to, though, I'll tell you straight up, is Orpheus and Eurydice the most, because Orpheus's just naive love is something I've felt before. I mean, literally, Hermes says, "Don't come on too strong." He goes, "Come home with me." It's like, oh, jeez, And that purity I feel, and that urge to defend and care for that woman that he loves so much, I really, really hit. But Hades' song, Little Songbird, of what he tells Eurydice, it's like, let me guess, he's a poet. Oh, dude, I feel that, man. Because the thing is Orpheus, you can't. Has anyone seen She's Having a Baby from John Hughes?
No.
Okay. Interesting movie. But there's a fantasy sequence where Kevin Bacon's the husband and he's a writer, and they're basically, I think I'm going to get the quote wrong, but I quote this, me and my family will say, words are cheap, fire is expensive. And he's throwing his papers into a barrel. It's a fantasy sequence. And I think about that with this movie, or not that movie, that movie with this play in that same sense of Orpheus can't provide for her. And I understand that from Orpheus's perspective of that guilt. And that's like, if you just leave me alone, if I can just do this, and that ticking time bomb of, can I care for her and do what I need to do at the same time? But also with Eurydice, yeah, those creative people are wonderful, but at the same time, they're sometimes on a different level, and you gotta eat if you're really starving. And that desperation and fear is something I never really connected with these kinds of characters before. And that really clicks for me.
For me, I think I'm in the same way. I guess for me, the ones that really stuck with me was Hades and Orpheus. Because I relate to Orpheus's doubt and how it cost you so much. Self-doubt is my number one weakness. It creates the shame spiral and anxieties that I go through on a daily basis. Like, and when I say daily, I mean it. I mean, I wake up in the morning and I'm automatically like, everything I do sucks. Nothing I do is going to work out. This is all going to be horrible. And everything's going to be on fire, and I'm not going to be able to put it out. And other people believe in me, and other people have faith in me, and it's all going to crash. How do I stop it from crashing? How do I stop it from crashing? That is my brain 24/7. But the thing I love about Orpheus and the message that Hermes has in the Road to Hell about how it is a sad song, but we sing it anyway, is the idea that even if I do think that it's all going to crash, even if I know that the odds are stacked against me, even if I still show up and I do it every day, regardless. And I think that's important for every single creative in the world to know, to remember that we all know the odds. We all know that there are millions upon millions of people who are going after the same things you are going after and want the same things, and majority of them will never ever get where they want to go. That's the odds. But being a creative, you show up and you create anyway, because what if you're the one? What if you're the one that wins? What if everything goes right for you? And you show up to the blank page every day with that simple question in mind. And at least that's what I do. I don't know what anybody else does. I just know that despite the fact that I have all the doubts in the world, I always show up because that one question remains in my mind. What if it goes right? What if, just because history has shown me that it doesn't always, what if this time is different? And no matter how many times, and the funny thing is, the more times you show up, the more chances that time is going to be the time that it works. We all have that, I've done it enough, I'm not going to do it anymore, and I'm done. And that only guarantees that you won't. But if you keep showing up, that guarantees that there's a chance that one of these days you're going to flip over the card and it's going to be the winner. That's just how it is. And so I admire that about Orpheus, because I feel that Orpheus is always going to be there to flip the card. I imagine it. The fact that the play has this, or the musical has this circular storytelling of when it ends, it starts again. And he does the same thing. And yes, it ends the same way technically for him every time. But I had never in my mind envisioned Orpheus saying, you know what? Fuck Eurydice, I'm not going to go down that path, because what's the point? I know that he's never going to do that. He's always going to keep trying, because what if it works out differently? What if this time I don't turn around? What if? So let's go. And I love that. The showing up, even though you might not win. There's a quote that I posted on my Facebook today, but I've seen it so many different places. I forget where it comes from, but I love it because I think it's so powerful. It has resonated with me for so long. And it's, fail we may, sail we must. Fail we may, sail we must. And it's the whole idea that, yeah, it may not work out, but we have to try. And I just think that's so amazing. And that's why I relate to Orpheus so much. Hades is more about the ambition. It's less about ambition, more about love, and more about recognizing that loving people so deeply love can become a prison of its own. after a while. And Hades is a great example of that. And your passion can become a prison of its own. Your love for the game can become a prison if you let it. If you don't keep that passion alive and you begin to take it for granted what it is. The thing that I said in the article that I want to say here too before I jump to the trivia is we don't have to do this. We get to do this. You chose this. You chose to create. And in choosing to create, it comes with the responsibility, but also the pleasure and the honor to be able to do this thing. And even if it doesn't turn out to be the way you want it to turn out this time, you still have the honor of getting to show up and write something, to tell a story, even if only 3 people read it. And those 3 people happen to be your editors and maybe your mom. It doesn't matter. You got to make something. You made something and put it into the world. There are so many authors out there, and I say this just because I need to say it. There are so many authors out there who put stuff out there and no one ever saw it when they were alive and they died, and now they are fucking classics. It doesn't matter. It sucks for them because, like, damn, we wish you could have got to enjoy the embrace of the people to finding your thing. Sure. But you contributed to the fabric of our civilization. Can never be taken away. And that can never happen if you don't show up and do it.
Mm.
So, I don't know. Just a thought that I feel like needs to be out there. And it's how I resonated with Orpheus and Hades specifically.
I absolutely love what you said. To that point, another thing that hit me just in reading on Wikipedia the history of this musical and how it came to be, I feel like the way this musical was written is a testament to small beginnings, persistence, and collaboration. Because, I mean, the earliest showing of it was back in 2006. In like a small theater in like Vermont or something like that.
Long time ago.
Yes.
I did not know that.
It was a long time ago. And there's like let me see. There's like there was an early version 2006 to 2007. There was a concept album in 2010 because the writer didn't know like what was going to happen with it. So it just said, well, we'll make a concept album of it. It was off Broadway. And then it was picked up by someone who helped them add like an additional 15 songs to fill in plot holes. And it went through like a bunch of different collaborators to beat it up into what it is today. And it was in Canada in 2017, London 2018. Finally, in 2019, it hit Broadway. And now it's the masterpiece that it is today. So even just... I feel like the lessons that are in this musical, in this story, were taken to heart by the writer. And you can see the way it turned out for them when they kept persisting and they found people who believed in the story and helped make it better, and they just kept believing, even with the small beginnings. And in the song where Persephone was trying to encourage all the workers in the underworld, she said, "Hey, look, there's a crack in the wall."
Mm.
I think that there is always a crack in the wall. You just have to be the one to find that crack. And when Orpheus decided to go after Eurydice, he got to the wall and everyone's asking him, like, who do you think you are? Who do you think you are to try and come in here? Hades asked him, like, who do you think you are to tell me that I have to let Eurydice go? But that question, like, why not me?
Right. I love that. And for the record, audience, this is shaping up to be an encouragement episode, less about lessons, and that's nobody's fault but mine. But also because of Hades Town, to me, even when I wrote the article that I wrote about it, it turned out like even in that article, I realized when I was done with it, it wasn't a really big story mechanic. There's a lot of story mechanic stuff in it that we could break down, but I feel that in a world that we're currently living in right now, where the quote that keeps going around is "there is no bread and they burn down the circus," that seems to be going around, which is the idea that in ancient Rome, the thing that kept people
Gosh, dang
busy
it.
was, bred in circuses. And now with all of us in survival mode, struggling to live and struggling to do whatever, and Hollywood or LA on fire, literally on fire. And then, of course, like I said, with TikTok being banned, it's like not only is our survival kind of an issue, but the things that entertain us in the midst of us not being able to survive are also kind of going away. And I think that in this time where that's the case, I think it's important for creatives to start recognizing that there's a grand opportunity that's about to be in front of many of us. With TikTok possibly going away, there's a grand opportunity for many of us, not just as a company, but as artists, to be discovered, because there will be this big vacuum that needs to be filled, and this is the opportunity for you to do it. And I think a lot of us hold back on putting ourselves out there because of fear and doubt. We are Orpheus at the gate. That is what we are in this moment. And when we have two choices, we can look behind us and throw it all away, or we can not give in to doubt and take that step forward. And I think that it's important that we have an episode like this where it's not about how do you tell a better story. It's how to be the kind of person worthy of telling the stories that you have to tell. And that's what this episode is about. At least that's what this episode is shaping up to be about to me. So I don't mind the fact that there hasn't been a crazy breakdown of story mechanics. And if that's what you came here for, I'm sorry to disappoint you. But I do think that the gems that are being dropped here by everybody involved, I think are fantastic in the grand scheme of how do I become a better artist? Because being a better writer is not just about what you can do on the page, right? Yeah. It's not just about what you create. It's about you as a person and how do you do that? And so I think this is a great opportunity for us to have that conversation. All that heavy shit aside, we're gonna have a little bit of trivia to go into.
All right, I'm ready to lose.
Here, Jaylon, would you like the Rocky IV quote, or would you like the Bob's Burgers quote to you, from me to you?
Both.
Okay. I must break you. And also...
Okay, I'm ready.
Your ass is grass, I'm gonna mow it.
All right, just for that line being beaten.
I don't know everything, but...
All right, I'm going to give you guys a softball right out the gate, all right? Who is the king of the gods in Greek mythology?
Zeus.
Okay. That's 1 for 1.
We know the very basics.
All right. Okay, this one is it's kind of easy. If you don't know this, I will say it is also the name of one of my cats. Which god is associated with the sun, music, and prophecy?
Apollo.
Charles.
Should I wait?
No,
I tease.
Should I wait before I pummel you? Should I give you a head start before I beat you?
Not just get it over with. Kill me quickly. There's Princess Bride.
Here we go. Who is the messenger of the gods? Okay. All right. Last
also
one.
Also Rhodes, by the way.
What happened?
Rhodes. Hermes is Rhodes and the messenger god, but also his thingamajig that he carries is the famous image of like hospitals. I cannot remember. It's the snake around the staff. I cannot remember that name.
I know what you're talking about. I can't remember the name either.
Okay. Which king turned everything he touched into gold?
Midas?
Midas?
Okay. Yes. See, I am also horrible with pronunciation because I learned everything through reading. And some books are not gracious enough to have a pronunciation guide. So for the longest time, fun story, until I listened to this musical, I did not know that Persephone wasn't pronounced Persephone.
I understand that.
I understand it too, but it reminds me of, I was watching this video earlier on TikTok about name something that you've pronounced wrong once and it's stuck with you your entire life. And so just the list, I can't go into the list of all of the things, but the ones that like stood out was like, the guy was like hepatitis for hepatitis. Oh my God. I'm just going to send the video to you guys because it's hilarious. The things that people spelled wrong or pronounced wrong. And so when you said that, I was like, oh no, I have to make a video and put you in that.
You're killing Charles.
Sorry about that, but it was hilarious. But yes, so that's our trivia. We will have Oh, would you rather? But we're going to do that one at the end, just so we can jump back in it. So I want to talk about, I was about to say, the way I was about to word that was just going to be really weird, but I was really like, I want to talk about women. But what I wanted to say was, I wanted to talk about the role of... Yes, right after that mispronunciation. Sorry. I wanted to talk about the role of the women in this story and the different in the how they challenged the traditional versions of themselves, because they are I can't see. They are drastically different. Not drastically, but they are different than their mythological counterparts. Partially, I think, because it was written by a woman, so I think she got it. She got the assignment. But that being said, what are you guys' thoughts on how Eurydice and Persephone challenged their traditional roles, and how do you think their agency in the story affected the impact of it? Or how did it impact the story?
Well, I think they create the story.
Yeah.
In general, of how they refuse to follow exactly what their significant others say is best for them, or what they're going to do with their planned future together, and challenge them in a really interesting way to, you could potentially even say, better men, to be honest. But I mean, the thing is so back to Lot's wife, she doesn't have a name.
That's true.
I mean, she literally doesn't have a name. Her identity is named man's wife.
Mhm.
Put it this way, I believe Lot's daughters, trigger warning, rape their father, have names.
Yep.
So by just having Eurydice have more freaking personality, as wonders. But that's not just enough, though, right? You can't just throw in more character traits and be done with it. I think something that adds more to it is Eurydice. I find it fascinating that Eurydice is this tough girl of the world for theater kid Orpheus, which I think says a lot about her, and I think does a lot for something so little. And the same with Persephone. The fact that she's constantly bugged by this dude, you don't even need to know the original myth of that to really pick up on that. But the fact that when Orpheus is singing to Hades, she's a little bit softer to him, I think says a lot, because the lady has the singer, again, I don't know her name, has a very, not raspy, but it's almost, maybe it is raspy, I'm not quite sure, but it's a rougher voice. It's not as princessy, songy as Eurydice's, and yet there's a little bit more going on there. So there's more of the contrast. Because I think the thing is, you can give someone personality, that's great, but people have contrasts to themselves. I think those types of contrasts, maybe I remember not the definitive way of getting character, but it's definitely a quick way, and not to mention an interesting way to have more character. So that's something I always really, really enjoyed from this musical. Even re-listening to it, I was like, oh yeah, they got some oomph to them, which is very much appreciated.
I agree. I find it interesting that in the original myth of Persephone, I'll start with Persephone. In the original myth, she is described as naive, and her mother is controlling her because she is scared about what trouble she could run into being so naive. So I find it interesting in all the retellings that I have found fascinating is they take that naivety and they put something behind it, and then they show how Hades forces her to move past her naivety. And suddenly, now that we're in this story now, timeline-wise, and she's jaded. I mean, she has reaped the consequences of her naivety and learned the hard way what it means to be trapped with a toxic man. But she doesn't lie down and die. She continues to do little things behind his back, like run that speakeasy for all the workers behind his back and give them jars of sunshine or wind in their hair that she brought from the upside. I call it the upside. I don't remember what they called it in the movie, but the land of the living. She brought spring back to them. And, she's the one who's brave enough to go and confront him and say, like, hey, you need to let Eurydice go. Because she's all that Orpheus has. She's everything to him. She's nothing to you, she's everything to him. And also, you were in that same exact position when you fell in love with me. So I find that makes her a very well-rounded and believable character, as well as being strong. Because I think a lot of people create strong female characters and expect them to basically be calling the shots everywhere and overcome every single obstacle. Nothing can touch them, and they have no weaknesses whatsoever, no thorns in their side, so to speak. But I find that's not very realistic. I find those strong female characters just as shallow as the damsel that just is there for the male character to rescue. Because I don't see any of myself in there. I think every character needs some kind of weakness, some kind of lesson that they have learned that informs how they view life now. And same with Eurydice. Eurydice is labeled as naive in the description of this musical. But it wasn't until I saw the way she was played when I started watching those clips from the Broadway show. And I think it was Maya Rafiko that I watched. And the costuming, the way she carried herself, the way she was played, didn't come across as naive to me. She was a survivor. She did what she thought she had to do. Even in, being so hungry, not being right in the head. She made mistakes and she had to grow from them. But she also had moments of bravery, where she told Orpheus, I'm willing to go through this test with you. I'm willing to follow you. And I'm right here. I will take these steps with you. So I think that they did a really good job creating well-rounded characters. And because they were well-rounded, we saw both their strengths and their weaknesses.
I agree with that. I will say I also really okay, I have a lot of thoughts, but I'm going to try to keep it concise. I will say that I like creating and writing and interacting with female characters that are interesting. It's one of the reasons why I like making my antagonists women. One, because women are I remember I had a therapist that was like, do you like making women antagonists because you don't like women? And I was like,
well, do you?
No. Yeah, he said it to me. Yeah, he said that to me. And she said that to me, and I said, no. I said, if you know anything about me, you know that antagonists are my favorite characters on anything that I write. I start every story I write with my antagonist first, and I put more into my antagonist than I do any other character. And I always think that there is something interesting about the character, about a person or being that has historically been seen as the damsel, or the one that needs to be, or the weak, naive, foolish, flighty character, to be the one that's the most competent on the board and the most dominant and the actual threat to the protagonist in some way, shape, or form. Not because she's being overtly sexual or anything like that, but because she's genuinely smarter and more empathetic than the main character oftentimes is. And I think there's something fascinating about empathetic villains. Not so much in the sense of you can empathize with them. That within itself is always fascinating. But I love a villain themselves that is empathetic. There's something weird to me about a person who can do harm to other people, but who still cares about what they do. And I think that empathy is a quality of mine that I admire, but I learned it from a woman. I was raised by women. That was my entire life. Most of my formative years were spent with women. Because of that, I have an admiration for women that allows me to kind of want to see them win. And I cannot stand characters when people create characters that are either the woman is like Jaylon said, the woman is either so strong that she has no weaknesses whatsoever, or she's weak and needs to be saved all the time. I love a human character. She's, me and Charles have been working on our own little project, and one of the things we had was a character that we were trying to build, a woman character, and that was definitely a conversation that we had about not wanting her to be the typical damsel, but also wanting her to be strong but still be human. Am I getting that right, Charles? Yeah. So it's like
not to be, what is it from Rick and Morty? Hot but doesn't know it.
Yeah,
which is another trend.
That's another one. Yeah. So I think I like that these characters, everybody in this character, the women in this. I agree with Charles as well as you, Jaylon, but I agree with Charles where he says that they made the story because they did. I think Persephone in myth is perceived as a victim of Hades, and it's we can go back and forth about not back and forth, but we can go on and on and on about how in religion there is a consistent need to suppress women in every way possible. Women are responsible for the great atrocities of mankind.
Knew it. I'm sorry. It was getting a little heavy. I apologize. Continue. Sorry.
But no, the religious perspective of Eve, for instance, who's responsible for the destruction and downfall of mankind.
Which, by the way, I'd like to add, even as a kid, I was like, oh, so it's Eve. I'm like, no, it's not. As a kid, it's like, well, no, I'm like, because Adam was the dumb idiot who didn't have to listen.
Right, exactly. But somehow he's absolved from his responsibility as the leader as a husband who is supposed to lead. He somehow, and in the same book that teaches us that we're supposed to, as men, we're supposed to lead. We're also taught that the first man absolutely didn't lead, and instead he did lead. He led all of us into destruction. So thanks a lot, Adam. Anyway,
yeah. No, I feel like I've seen places where it does point out Eve isn't mentioned at all. It's Adam's fault.
Right. So it's I think that not just religion, but I think that any story, mythology as well, is constantly perceived. Women are always seen as kind of either the victim of man's atrocities or they are responsible for men being atrocious, one way or another. That's the way it seems, based on a lot of the mythology stuff that I've seen. And granted, I'm nowhere near as educated on mythology as I'd like to be quite yet. It's definitely something I'm actively working on changing, but it's just not where I'm at yet. So, but in the experience that I've had so far, that's the pattern that I've seemed to pick up. And I think that for Persephone, who comes off often as a victim of Hades, who's just kind of spending her entire life under the gun of I'm this beautiful canary in a gilded cage type of thing, is kind of weird. And it's interesting to see her as no, she's out and about and having a good time, and who makes the world, or who makes the flowers bloom, or whatever she says, Persephone, that's who. It's that confidence, she comes into her own, and I love to see it. Eurydice, I also agree. I didn't see her as naive at all. I saw her as the one that was really pushing the story forward. Because when I don't know, whenever I think of naive characters like that, I always think, and I'm gonna get some hate for this, but I always think Belle, and Beauty and the Beast. And by that I mean more of the animated Beauty and the Beast Disney movie. I always felt like she was smart, but she felt kind of in that whole hot but doesn't know it type of category. She's a beautiful woman who's smart, but she doesn't really realize the power that she has over men, but she doesn't want anybody, but everybody wants her. But she's also kind of, I don't know. This isn't about Beauty and the Beast. We'll have that conversation whenever we decide to watch Beauty and the Beast. But I've always had an issue with. I don't have an issue with Belle. Don't get me wrong. I like that. That's one of my favorite Disney movies. But in the grand scheme of things, when I envision a character that's naive and who feels like they're a little passive, I think Belle, because I always felt Belle was a little passive in that movie. And in this, I felt like Eurydice was more take charge, more the world kind of felt like it revolved around Eurydice. The moment she walked in and does anybody have matches, it's this is about this person, and every decision that she's going to make, I want to know about it because it's going to matter. It's going to change things. It's going to make things shift. In fact, I almost felt like Orpheus was kind of in her shadow for most of the Yeah, I don't know. I definitely love that these characters were, and you already see in mythology as well, from what I've read, was also kind of, they were in love, and then she just tragically dies, and then just kind of that's that. But she didn't have any like soul to her. But this gave her soul. This whole that's another thing. This whole musical was dripping with soul,
Yeah.
and I loved that about it. That, yeah, hands down, love that about it. So I'll say that I think that the women were well handled, very well. And I think we need to see more female characters like that in fiction.
I'd also like to add to that, in an interesting note, you also can have a simplistic character who's a lady who kicks butt all the time. She's called Red Sonja, and she wears a metal bikini. But you know what's great about her, especially the way Gail Simone writes her? She takes crap from no one. But note that she's a pulp fantasy character, and that can still work. Just know that when you do certain types of characters, it's kind of like, oh, what's the phrasing? It's kind of like, chives are great with this meal, but if you put chives in a blender, it's not necessarily going to work. So that's something to kind of keep in mind with characters. It's just something you said that kind of, I was like, oh, wait, Red Sonja. That sounds like Red Sonja. So just kind of an interesting idea there.
Another example of that is Buffy. I've been watching a little bit here and there, Buffy the Vampire Slayer a little bit. And regardless of what you think of Joss Whedon and his problems, Buffy herself as a character is very, 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 it's a great example. I didn't always see that, because in the passing glimpses that I had, I always thought, oh, she's the blonde, yeah, she kicks butt, but she's got no weaknesses and she's whatever. But then when I watched it, I was like, oh no, she was a character that was afraid of things that could happen, and she was showing it. There was the most, and then I'll move on, but this just has to be said. The most interesting thing I'd ever seen on Buffy was when Buffy realizes that to stop the Master, she has to die. And she ultimately is like, I quit. I don't want to be a Slayer anymore. I don't want to die. I'm 16 years old. I don't want to do that. And it was just like, to me, it struck me as so human and so real that, like, this is a person. This isn't just like, oh, this isn't an archetype of a character. This is a person, because I could imagine that too. If I'm 16 years old and my destiny is to fight this big demon vampire dude and I'm supposed to die, there's no way I'm doing that. Not at a 16 years old. Sacrifice doesn't mean shit to me. I'm not doing none of that. And that felt so real to me. So I think that you can have real female characters that kick butt, but could also be flawed and human. And I think that's where you have to start. I think with any character creation, really, is start with the fact that this is a human being. It doesn't matter what the gender is. This is a human first, and then build from there. It's the same as we talk about with vampires. It's like, oh, how do you write vampires? It's like, make them human first, and they just happen to be vampires. That's how you do women, or you create women characters. You make them people first, and they just happen to be women, and you'll have a solid female character. Unless you are terrible at just creating people in general, then there's more work to be done here. But but that's fine. Moving on. Let's talk about the ending, because we're gonna have to wrap up soon. So let's talk about the ending, specifically how we talked about tragic endings earlier on, and this story is tragic, right? We all can agree that it's kind of tragic. It has a hopeful "we drink to you" ending, but it's still kind of tragic. Why does the ending feel inevitable yet impactful, and how does it inspire you as a creative to keep singing?
I feel like Charles already said all the big punches about this one. Cause yeah, like the hopefulness, and you, Jared, like the hopefulness of like, keep showing up, keep telling the story again, cause maybe it'll be different this time. It can be exhausting to be in a vicious cycle like that, to feel like you keep trying, you keep trying, you keep trying, and you keep failing. But there's something that is still so meaningful there. And being able to tell sad stories, being able to tell stories that have been told before, but tell them in a new way, it has value for humanity. There's so many stories with sad endings that hit harder than stories with happy endings, because sometimes in life, everything doesn't work out. and that sucks. And we all want something better. But it's also very validating to learn from these stories that are tragedies.
Yeah, for me, I think the ending is inevitable or feels inevitable, not because of this ancient Greek idea that life has to suck, and if you don't pick up on that, then you're stupid because the ancient Greek is dead. Ancient Greece is dead. We don't need to be held bound by it. And it's the same I feel about ancient Rome. But moving on, the thing is though is that it feels inevitable because you know who Orpheus is as a guy, and unfortunately, he is too vulnerable and sensitive and can't have that faith the whole time because he's frail. Again, I would probably do the same thing. In fact, I probably already have in some capacity. But in terms of the inspiration of it, I think it really does fascinate me with these kinds of tragedies that we do still keep reading them and watching them again and again and again and again because they never ever change. And I think it's not just the sense of hope that is instilled in them already. I think it's also that sense of, like Jilan said, there is a power to them without them being happy. Because happy endings also have power, but I think tragic endings also have a different kind of power, which I think is this kind of belief that there is a value in constantly going down this doomed path. You know, like I said, no matter how many times you watch King Kong, Kong is still going to die. Period. There's nothing you can do. You can't fix the story. But you're still fascinated by it. And you're still willing to go on that journey, which I think is kind of like this weird microscopic example of life in a really interesting way, of that sense of, so like my favorite anime, which we must talk about at some point, is Cowboy Bebop. And there is a hope and an optimism to that story's ending, but it is definitely bittersweet. And it breaks my heart every single time. It brings me to tears every single time. But you still do it because I love that story. I love those characters. I love it. And I think that's kind of what inspires me here with Hadestown, is that yes, it doesn't work, but to redo it again, to listen to it, you get to experience that again and again, that sense of, you get that inspiration or that catharsis that you need. So a tragedy, even though the ending sounds like Slaughterhouse-Five in this case, even though the ending is not good, there's this whole other aspect to it before then that means something and has power that cannot be undone by this very ending. And I find that to be just an incredible element of tragedy that, again, I never really considered until this musical.
I love how you worded that.
I feel like I agree with that. I think for me, the whole inevitability, I agree, is definitely because of Orpheus. Even if you never knew anything about the mythology, I think it becomes inevitable if you are an artist, because I think we all recognize doubt.
We are very good at being self-destructive with our doubt.
For sure. And because we recognize that doubt, I think it becomes kind of obvious that, oh, he's going to turn around. He's going to. Also, if you're at all familiar with how stories work, you know he's going to turn around. But I think the philosophical reason in which we ask this question is more, or not even philosophical, but just kind of the less cheeky way of answering that is you don't necessarily need to know story to know that we know ourselves. And we all see that. We all know that we're all human. It's kind of the same thing as the Avengers. I want to say it wasn't Endgame. I think it was the one right before it.
Infinity War.
Yeah, I think that's the one where, is that the one where Peter attacks Thanos and screws the whole thing up?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that so many people got so pissed off about that. But the truth of the matter is we all would have made the same choice. We all would have made the same choice because it's a human choice. It's a human choice to be pushed to react emotionally, to react based off of our lesser selves, to act in the service of our lesser selves. We tend to naturally do that because that's human. It's just as much as we'd like to believe we'd be the one to take the step into the next world and never look back and bring our love with us and shake that, or we like to believe that if the fate of the universe was at our fingertips, but the person that hurt the person we love is right in front of us, that all we have to do is not get in the way, that we wouldn't get in the way because it's the fate of the universe. We like to think that we'd be the hero in the story, but the truth of the matter is most of us wouldn't be. We'd all be the fool in the story. And that's because it's our destiny. It's our destiny to choose emotion over logic, no matter who you are. And if you read the book Human Nature by Robert Greene, he talks about the law of irrationality. And he talks about how all human beings, there is no decision, there is no choice. We all make decisions with emotion entering the chat every single time. 10 out of 10 guaranteed you will always have emotion in your decision. Some of us are better at prioritizing, and that takes practice. But as a general rule, most of us just aren't built like that. So I see that when you see Orpheus and you see him in that way, that doubt. I mean, and if you really think about it too, the whole, like, you really see did choose to go to Hades town. She made that decision. She didn't get dragged there. She didn't, he didn't manipulate her. She didn't get bit by a snake, die, and go there. She made an active decision to go. And that within itself can trigger any man or woman to think, how can I trust not just that the gods wouldn't play a trick on me, but how can I trust that you won't long for the security and the security and warmth that Hades Town's going to give you, even though, you know the truth about it. How do I know you're not going to go back to that? And that doubt tricks you into saying, I got to look just to make sure. So I feel like, yeah, it was definitely inevitable. The other question that I asked you guys, how does it inspire you to keep singing?
Personally, I need to remind myself not to look back in doubt and wonder to the point of paralyzing myself if what I'm doing is going to make any kind of difference or have any kind of value. Yeah, I feel like we covered that pretty well, but it's a lesson that I need to keep telling myself again and again, that not only the responsibility of creativity and being the sensitive soul that is willing to walk through that darkness in order to give someone else a voice and hope, but also not to look back and doubt that that decision has any value.
For me, I'm not entirely sure right off the top of my head, good reason, of the play, but what you said about this having its first shindig six is incredibly moving to me. And by the way, that's the first public performance.
Yes.
That does not cover the actual development and work of it. That's an incredible thing because I am constantly hounded, especially as I get older. My birthday's in April, by the way, everyone. Tick, 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 tick. That the sense of getting older, that everything has passed by. I did not do A at the certain number time, and now it's over. And so the projects, but one specific one that I'm working on, coincidentally this April will be the 10th anniversary of the initial conception of the idea. And I'm just like, oh God, it just never ends. It just never ends. It's just going and going and going. And I'm trying. And well, time's up. 10 years must mean nothing. But to imagine that this thing took 13 years is incredible. But honestly, not even just the years, but the world of 2006 might as well be a different planet than 2019. So the idea that something could last through basically different worlds and still survive and have a happy ending, I think is exceptional. Which I guess to tie into the musical is that things don't work out on the doorway, but there was an end to the underworld. There was a door out, in and out. That actually kind of hits just something I've been needing to hear for this week. So thank you.
I love that. I stand with Charles on that because I feel the same way. I feel that way about One Brilliant Arc, in the sense that this isn't the first business I've tried to build, and I've met the door many times over, and it's been discouraging to me. But to get up and keep trying here, this is inspiring to do so. The other thing, and this one's probably even more inspiring, is my novel, which is supposed to come out this year, the end of the year, is like what Charles was talking about, is years and years and years in the making. I started writing mine in this around, I think 2016 is when I started working on this thing, and I put it in the drawer, and I took it out and worked on it, and then put it back in the drawer, given up on it, decided it was never going to see the light of day. Now here we are working on it, and another pair of eyes have seen it when I expected no one to ever see it ever. But now here we are pushing towards that door, and as we're towards that door, now my other fear comes, and this is that doubt of like, what if it all gets said and done and nobody cares? What if it all gets said and done and nobody wants to read it or nobody wants to buy it? And that's terrifying. It's terrifying, and sometimes it's one of those things where it's like, oh, why am I even doing this? Why am I even working on this? Nobody's going to give a shit. This is terrible, and editing, it's like, oh my God, I wrote this. This is crap. Oh my God, nobody's going to like this. But you got to keep singing. You got to keep singing, because you never know. You never know. Like the question I asked earlier, what if it all works out? And so what if the book becomes a bestseller? What if the project that Charles is working on becomes a cult classic thing that is just a fucking monster juggernaut thing for sci-fi fans the world over? What if that happens? And it's possible. That's the thing. As long as you are alive and breathing, it's possible that it can happen. And if it's possible, then you have to try. You have to. So I always urge Charles to continue on with it, and I know that he goes hard on it, right? Because I know that I've seen what he's working on, and I think that the world needs to see it too. So,
and I say that about Jared's book. So,
thank you. So I urge us both. I challenge us both to keep pushing forward, keep singing. Jaylon, I agree with you. Keep looking forward, even though the behind us is filled with doubt and fear and anxiety. There's so much possibility in front of us on all of the things that we're doing. And some of the stuff that we haven't even imagined is possible yet is right in front of us, and we don't even know. So, and that goes for you guys that are listening as well. You have no idea how amazing life can get if you just keep moving forward. And I know that's hard to say. I find it hard to say. Sometimes it feels a little bit disingenuous to even say it, because I look at life and I feel like, oh, it's not that great. But I have to believe. I have to believe that there is something just on the other side of all of this. And there is. I believe that. I know that there is. There are so many people who do make it. And so the question I have for you, the listener, and everybody here, is why not you?
Mm-hmm.
Why not you? Why? There's no rule, no law, no anything that says it can't be. So do it. It'll be fun. I promise. Actually, it'll be a nightmare, but it'll be great when you get there.
Always remember, your imperfection has power, just as it is. And as long as you are walking through the darkness for somebody else, even if it ends in a tragedy, there's still going to be good that comes out of it.
Facts. 1,000% true. 1,000% true. Okay, so as we wrap this up, I'm going to hit you guys with some would you rathers, and then we're going to get some recommendations. This week we're not going to say what we're watching next week, because I don't know, unless somebody here has a suggestion. I did say Inglourious Basterds on the last episode, but life.
The original Superman film a couple weeks ago.
Yes, we should actually watch that. Man, you know what?
Wait, the original what?
The original Superman, the Christopher Reeve Superman one. Yeah.
The original Superman. I don't know what that. I don't know what that is at all. I don't know what that is.
There's Charles' recommendation. There it was.
But thanks to Jaylon, I am immediately a liar. I will say what we're gonna watch next week, but all that's to
also,
say.
Just funny note: watching the original Superman was solely so that they could culture me on everything I missed out on being a sheltered child.
Very true. If that's the case, that's
Superman
the case,
is not acceptable for homeschooling? What?
I just wasn't into superheroes, and nobody in my house pushed it. No one said, this is a cultural experience you need.
Tisk. No. But so that's the case. We may have many a Superman episodes because there are lessons to be learned about good and bad storytelling in all of the Superman films. That includes the first one.
Almost perfect.
Fair point. So yes, to educate Jaylon on the epicness that is Superman, we will have to put her through Superman boot camp and make her watch all of the Superman films that have ever existed. Unfortunately, that includes Superman Returns. But sorry, Charles. Sorry.
Okay, let's do Would You Rather before we get into a fight here.
Before I'm attacked. Would you rather live in Hades Town and have safety and security, or live on top and face the risks of poverty? Feels like an obvious answer, but tell me what you guys think.
I like sunshine, and I like cold, and I like the adventure. So I would choose up top, because working in a dark factory with a roiling furnace and a creepy old dude sounds not so fun.
Fair enough.
To quote Sylvester Stallone, or paraphrase, I've done poverty before, so, I'm pretty good at that. And, I hate the billionaires, so, F them.
So up top it is. Yeah. I think I would do up top too. I was about to get kind of dark because I was going to say, like, my ancestors in indentured slavery and servitude are just no good. So I have no choice but to be up top. But I also would like to see the sun. I don't really like the sun all that much, but I could get used to. I don't know if I would like being denied the ability to see the sun. I don't necessarily won't seek it out, but I would like to know that it's there if I want to see it.
Yeah, I'll amend my statement. I like the sky. I don't care so much whether it's sunny or cloudy or nighttime. I've seen stars and moon. Like, I just like the sky.
Fair point. Okay, would you rather be Orpheus chasing an impossible dream, or Eurydice making the hard choice to survive?
I feel like I've been Eurydice before, and now I am trying to be Orpheus, and it is terrifying and exhausting.
Yeah, I feel there's a bunch of references going on in my head today. I feel like Lisa Simpson here, being someone else didn't work, being myself didn't work. So, I'm probably going to be doing more creative work after this, so I guess Orpheus, because Orpheus with Eurydice's pragmatism is the best. The balance. The right answer is the balance. Because you don't want to suffer forever like that, but you also don't want to rot your soul either. And that's a cop-out answer, but because you have to pick one. But the honest truth is it would be nice to be both, be able to survive, but also not, lose everything on the inside.
Fair enough.
Jared, these questions are too philosophical. We're having entire conversations around them.
Just
so you know me. I gotta bring out the philosophy. It has to be done.
Scream these questions.
So for me, I guess I would pick Eurydice. I just think it's character development. So I'll take that. Okay, would you rather be Hades and rule a kingdom but lose your heart? Or would you rather be Persephone, be a rebel and a free spirit, but be trapped in a cycle?
Again, I have been a rebel and a free spirit trapped in a cycle. I know I can do that. But I also know that ruling a kingdom without having a good heart is a recipe for disaster and infamy. So, I choose Persephone.
A cycle is a terrible, horrible, horrible thing, and honestly, I would rather be a king of something, but the idea of becoming numb for a lot of very dark reasons that I shall not be bringing up in this episode today terrifies me a little bit more, to be completely honest. So I guess the Persephone. Gosh, what are these questions, Jared?
Sorry.
Bringing the mood down, for Lord's sake.
We left on a really powerful note with that.
And then I had to
you're just drilling.
So
Stab
with
it,
that
stab it,
answer,
stab it,
I guess
stab it.
I'd say I'd be Hades. The evil ruler who just kind of shitted on all of you guys' positivity. My bad. Sorry. But yeah, I guess I'm gonna pick Hades. That's who I would be. I'm not gonna get into why. I'm just gonna say Hades and let you guys
Speculate.
say whatever that let that say whatever it says about me. That being said, let's talk about recommendations. What do you guys recommend this week?
I recommend y'all listen to Hades Town.
No, it
I
is
did.
good.
To be fair, I
She's been
did cheat on the
busy, she
first
said.
episode too, because it was another Broadway musical that was just too good not to recommend.
Well, I'm gonna do some flexing here.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, don't fall. Okay. So I have with me, to my understanding, there's a missing short story that was in the New Yorker or something like that. I can't remember. Which I swear that short story invented the mushroom apocalypse zombie thing before The Last of Us, which is crazy. But the entire collective words, and I swear this is how you pronounce his name. If I am pronouncing his name badly, I am so sorry. It's Juno Diaz, who's the writer. I have his kids' book he did. Now, I know this author has certain things that are a little bit messy. I understand that. I'm not going to say anything about that. This is fortunately how the world works. Some of these stories, this is, let's see, in chronological publication order, I think, is Drown, short stories. These are all kind of interconnected, sort of kind of. Drown. This is, you can see it's kind of worn, is The Brief Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde. I believe I'm pronouncing it correctly. I have a terrible pronunciation problem. This is I brought this book up before. This is one of my favorite books of all time. I did my thesis paper on this book. That's why I know it. You can't see it, but it's kind of worn. This fracking book changed my life. I've already written about this before, but I have to emphasize it again. This book changed my life forever in the best of ways. So this is one of my favorite things. And then this is How You Lose Her, which is another collection of short stories. I think actually one of these short stories in this one, no. Okay, it was in Drown. One of these short stories actually was in a semi-recent collection of great American short stories, in fact. And then this is his last one that he did, which is a kid's book called Islandborn, which is really, really lovely. And these are all about DR folk in America, usually in New York and Jersey, usually Jersey. But these are somewhat problematic if you view them from a certain lens. I think you need to kind of get your gardening gloves on with them, and somewhat a little bit repetitious, a little bit, but I think Diaz is fantastic. I think the story is fantastic, and they really awakened a lot in me. Again, this one especially, I fantasized of how I could adapt this into a film just for funsies, because it is that freaking good. It is the Latino Watchmen meets Lord of the Rings, if you want to get a little snappy thing there. But that is my recommendation. I have the entire collection sans that one short story because I can't find it in a collection. But ha ha ha, I have it. I do read books. I swear to the Almighty Lord, I do. I talk about comic books a lot, but I do read books. I swear, I love them.
For me, since we're doing, since Charles did a book, I recommend this one, which is weirdly backwards, but Trouble is a Friend of Mine by Stephanie Tromley. If you like crime, not really crime, but more like, if you like Veronica Mars, it's like Veronica Mars meets Bones, except one of the characters isn't a forensic scientist, but the whole the banter between the two detectives is some of the best banter I've ever seen. It's hilarious for a young adult novel, though. It's hilarious, fantastic. I love the protagonist, so I would recommend that. It was the closest thing I had to me, and I know it's really good, so I was like, check it out, and you guys enjoy it. Yeah, so that would be what I would suggest. All that being said, I want to take the moment to thank you two for being here, for sharing your thoughts, for being inspiring to our audience, but more importantly, I said it, more importantly to me, you guys have been incredibly inspiring to me, not just in this conversation, but in general. You guys' resilience is just, it's inspiring to me. And you guys are the real life mythological beings that I look to every single day and do what I do for. So I am so grateful for you guys. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. And thank you guys for listening. Feel free to follow us on all of our socials. We're going to plug those now. All under the same name, all at One Brilliant Arc. And we are on Instagram, on TikTok, for however long that lasts. Bluesky and Facebook those are the main locations where you can find us. And then, of course, if you have any questions or anything you want, suggestions or thoughts on the episode, please, you can send them to the DMs of our Substack, or you can email me personally at jared@obaconnect.com. That's OBACONNECT.com. And if you aren't following us or subscribe to our newsletter, check us out on www.obaconnect.com. That way you can get breakdowns of pop culture and all that good stuff and learn how to become a better writer both on and off the page. Again, we are grateful for you guys being here. Thank you for listening. And we will see you guys next week with, or not next week, but the week after with Superman. Yes, it will be Superman. Later, guys.